Jordan scored 20 points in the 96-65 win over Spain. Woo, that's a lot of money. All right, former President Jimmy Carter proving he is still a man of the people. The Georgia peanut farmer turned president, taking the time to shake the hand of every single passenger on a recent flight he took from Atlanta to the nation's capital. His warm gesture took off on social media, gaining thousands of likes and retweets. That's pretty cute. Every single person. All right, I'm Melissa Francis. Next, John Scott in for Shep.
Suing the president. The D.C. and Maryland attorneys general accusing President Trump of violating the Constitution. Ahead, the accusations and the defense. The U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions set to testify in public tomorrow. Senators are expected to have a lot of questions about the Russia investigation and his role in James Comey's firing. Meantime, Democrats and some Republicans say the president should answer once and for all whether he really has recordings of his conversations with Comey. Plus, first daughter and presidential advisor Ivanka Trump talks to Fox News and explains life in American politics is more vicious than she'd anticipated.
I was not expecting the intensity of this experience, but this isn't supposed to be easy.
More from Ivanka Trump and the rest of the day's news in this hour. I'm John Scott in for Shepard today. The attorneys general of Maryland and Washington, D.C. have filed a lawsuit against President Trump, accusing him of violating the Constitution over his ties with his businesses. The two officials say the president has broken an anti-corruption measure in the Constitution called the Emoluments Clause by allowing his businesses to accept payments from foreign governments. They also say they will demand President Trump hand over his tax returns as evidence in the case.
President Trump is unique in American history in violating the Emoluments Clause. There is no other president whose domestic and foreign investments and entanglements have been so bound up with our policy and our interests. And he is the only president who has refused to disclose the extent of his holdings and interests.
Both officials are Democrats, but they say their lawsuit is nonpartisan and would apply to a future Democratic president with major business dealings. The Attorney General used Mark Zuckerberg and Oprah as possible examples. Justice Department lawyers have said President Trump's businesses are legally entitled to accept payments from foreign governments while he's in office. The Trump administration is also facing a separate legal setback involving the president's controversial travel ban. More on that ahead. First, Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live at the White House. So, John, what else is the White House saying about this lawsuit?
Well, let's put all of this into context for you. First of all, you mentioned the specific language, John, that the attorneys general of the District of Columbia and the state of Maryland were using, saying that it violates the anti-corruption provisions of the Constitution, as opposed to using the drier technical language of it violates the Emoluments Clause, because not many people in this country know what an emolument is, but everybody knows what corruption is. And they're claiming that by maintaining ownership in his vast business empire, that Donald Trump really is harming the states of Maryland and the District of Columbia by owning properties like the Trump Hotel. And they say that people are going to gravitate toward that business as opposed to going to other businesses in either the district or the state of Maryland. To which the press secretary this afternoon said, hogwash. Here's Sean Spicer.
The president's interests, as previously discussed, do not violate the Emoluments Clause for reasons that length that the Department of Justice filing enumerate in their Friday night filing with respect to the Crew lawsuit, which was the first one. This lawsuit today is just another iteration of the case that was filed by that group Crew, filed actually by the same lawyers. So it's not hard to conclude that partisan politics may be one of the motivations behind the suit. The suit was filed by two Democratic attorney generals. The lawyers driving the suit are an advocacy group with partisan ties.
Sean Spicer also pointed out that today began with a press conference before the filing. But, you know, even if this were to be a partisan exercise, John, this is just yet another speed bump in the president trying to get his agenda through. I mean, it seems like all of his opponents really are running a prevent defense, trying to, you know, get him to stop moving the ball down the field and run out the clock to 2020. It's going to take a lot of work, but they seem dedicated to do it. John?
All right, John, stay with us as we look ahead. This time tomorrow, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is set to be facing questions from senators over his role in the firing of former FBI Director James Comey and the Trump campaign's potential ties to Russia. You can watch it live right here on Fox News Channel. Sessions will testify in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the same committee that grilled Comey last week. And you can expect senators to ask about this comment Comey made about the Attorney General.
Our judgment, as I recall, was that he was very close to and inevitably going to recuse himself for a variety of reasons. We also were aware of facts that I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic.
Senators say they also want to know what happened before and after the meeting in which Comey claims President Trump pushed him to drop the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Comey testified that the president asked Sessions and everyone else in the Oval Office to leave the room before that conversation. The president denies asking Comey to drop the Flynn investigation. Let's go now to the White House. That's where the president is talking to the Clemson Tigers, the winners of the NCAA Bowl Championship.
One of the most important truths in life, that success is about how hard you are willing to fight in order to overcome and in order to win. After being down 14-0, I don't think the coach was worried. Were you worried? Yeah, probably. A little bit. How about a little bit, Coach? Maybe? You're down 14-0 almost halfway through the game. Like true Tigers, Clemson roared back, and with the whole nation watching and beyond the nation, Deshaun Watson, going to be a great NFL player, watch. Where's Deshaun? Get over here. Come here. Hey, fellas, is he that good? Tell me. You better believe it. He's going to be fantastic. He passed the ball to Hunter Renfrow. Where's Hunter? Oh, Hunter, you're so lucky you caught that ball. To score the game-winning touchdown with just 1 second left on the clock. That's pretty cool. There was an inspirational finish to a historic season for Clemson. The team willed their victory. You willed it. That was a victory that was willed. Arnold Palmer, they used to say, great champion, he would will a victory. Jack Nicklaus, he would will a victory. The great champions tend to do that. This team will their whole way to victory. You came so incredibly close last year against Alabama. You don't remember that game, Coach, do you? Huh? Well, you'll never forget. Huh? And you wanted to rematch, and you got the rematch, and you went on, and you earned it. You beat great teams like Florida State, Ohio State, and, of course, your big rival, South Carolina. You believed in yourselves, you believed in each other, and you won a championship victory for the ages. It's one of the greatest games I ever watched, actually. People are going to be talking about what you did for a very, very long time. That victory and the great comeback was the product of a vision that began 9 years ago when Coach Sweeney assembled a team of assistant coaches who believed in his vision. They recruited great, great players, and together you worked hard, had fun, and turned Clemson football into a winning machine. That's what it is. The Tigers have gone an astonishing 89-28. How'd you lose 28 games, Coach? Huh? That was the early seasons, right? Most of them were in the early, while you were building. Under the coach's leadership, he helped forge a new culture at Clemson. It was on display in the locker room right after the big game. The coach recalled how he told the team that the theme of the college football playoffs this year is chasing greatness. He told them nobody's better than us, and we've got to believe it. It's great. Tell yourself that. Nobody's better. You chased greatness, and now you've achieved true greatness. I understand that on the inside of your championship ring, there's a tiger climbing upwards, and it says, little extra, just a little extra. That's often the difference between winning and losing, just a little extra, right, Coach? Is that right? And by the way, standing next to the coach is another winner, your El Presidente, Jim Clements. That's another winner, I'll tell you that. We don't talk about Jim too much, but number one, he made a lot of good decisions. Number two, what people don't realize about Clemson, it's a great academic school, one of the top 25. So, and as a combination, probably number one. Right? Great job, Jim. That's how Clemson achieved great things, when you set an expectation of maximum effort and a culture of confidence from the top. You inspire every person to perform at their very, very best. And that is exactly what you have done. More Tigers this year than ever before. 9 of you went to the NFL Scouting Combine, and 2 of you were drafted in the first round. That's pretty good. But during that championship game, all of you shined, every single one. Offensive MVP quarterback Deshaun Watson took some very, very hard hits, but he never rattled. He's great under pressure. I've seen that. I've heard that. He's great under pressure. That's a good thing to be. He is great under pressure. He always got right back up, and he fought, and he fought, and he kept winning. Now he'll bring that toughness together to the Houston Texans, and I have the owners of the Texans here someplace. We just saw them, and they are so excited about Deshaun. Defensive tackles, Carlos Watkins had an incredible game, and he'll be joining Deshaun in Houston. I'm going to be watching that team very closely. Nobody can read plays like defensive MVP Ben Bulwer. Where's Ben? Carlos, get up here, Carlos. You think I could take these guys in a fight? I don't know. Great guys. First team All-American defensive end, Christian Wilkins, was a big part of the defensive effort in the championship game. And wide receiver, Hunter Renfrow, had that incredible 10 receptions that night. I also want to extend our best wishes to defensive end Richard Yergin, who suffered a terrible neck injury in a recent automobile accident and is out for the 2017 season. But he'll be back, and we're praying for you. And, Richard, I know you're going to get better, and you're going to be all set. All of you are continuing a proud sporting tradition at Clemson, established long ago by some of football's greatest champions and leaders. Your school was home to the legendary Coach Heisman Trophy, who delivered a win in the Tigers' first Alabama matchup way back in 1900. I know Coach Heisman would be very proud of you, Coach, today, looking down. Be very proud. He liked to win. He knew winners. And his team's most recent, incredible, and most exciting victory. So thank you for being here today. It's our honor to be in the company of great, great champions, and that's what they are. I wish you all the best in your careers. Wherever they may take you, whether it's football or business or anything else, you're going to be very successful. And if you work hard, fight hard, and believe in yourselves, perhaps I'll see you one day back here, right at the White House. In fact, I think one of the folks behind me has a really good chance of standing where I am today as a future president of the United States. They have that tremendous, incredible talent, more than just athletic talent. So congratulations again to the college football playoff national champions, the Clemson Tigers. And with that, I want to introduce President Jim Clements, who has truly done an amazing
It was an incredible comeback for the Clemson Tigers when they beat Alabama, denying them another national championship back in January, the college football championship game. The president likes to recognize underdogs or come from behind winners, and he's doing that right now at the White House. In the meantime, let's get back to one of the big stories of the day. The Attorney General Jeff Sessions has agreed to testify tomorrow in front of a Senate committee. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is covering it from the White House today. John?
John, again this afternoon, don't forget, second time the president has been able to do that with the football team hosting the New England Patriots earlier this year. Now, we were talking about Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, is going to be appearing in an open session, the Sessions Open Session, as we're calling it here, before the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow. Now, it's no secret that the president disagreed with and continues to disagree with the fact that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation when the president was appearing on the USS Gerald Ford. The day that Sessions recused himself, he was actually asked whether he thought the AG should step down from the Russia investigation. He said, no, I don't think he should. And now Sessions is going to talk about all of that, plus his meetings with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the United States, and other issues regarding Russia in that open session tomorrow. But according to the press secretary, who talked about this just a short time ago, the president does not have any problem with that happening. Listen to what Spicer said.
He believes that the sooner we can get this addressed and dealt with, that there's been no collusion. He wants this to get investigated as soon as possible and be done with it so he can continue with the business of the American people.
Now, we weren't sure initially if Sessions was going to appear in a private classified session or if he was going to do it in an open testimony. But we had this statement from the Department of Justice earlier today, quote, the Attorney General has requested that this hearing be public. He believes it is important for the American people to hear the truth directly from him and looks forward to answering the committee's questions tomorrow. So it would appear, at least on the outset, from the surface here, that the Attorney General doesn't have anything that he's particularly concerned about airing in an open session. Neither does the president. But don't forget, John, this is going to be the third time that Jeff Sessions has overshadowed the president's agenda. It happened right after the joint address to, or the address to a joint session of Congress, when the meetings that Sessions had with Sergei Kislyak first became public, and then it happened a week later when he recused himself. And now tomorrow, as the president is traveling to Waukesha, Wisconsin, for a big workplace event, the Attorney General is going to be there on Capitol Hill testifying, which will knock President Trump out of the headlines. So I don't know if 3 times a curse or 3 times a charm. We'll witness it tomorrow, John.
Never a dull moment there at the White House. John Roberts, our chief White House correspondent. Thank you. More now on the Sessions testimony tomorrow. Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. Mike.
Well, John, good afternoon. It's expected to be tense as Attorney General Jeff Sessions is up here on Capitol Hill answering a wide range of questions, all in public with the nation watching. It is worth noting that the Attorney General himself requested that it be an open session in front of the Senate Intelligence Panel. A spokesperson saying that the Attorney General believes it's important for the American people to hear the truth directly from him. You can expect more questions for Sessions about his interactions with Russian officials, including Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. A Republican member of the Senate Intelligence Panel says there will be plenty to ask.
Comey's statement to him of, hey, I don't want to get time alone with the president again, and that interaction, as well as these accusations that are flying out there about conversations that he might or might not have had with Russians prior to the election. So we want to be able to get his side of it, get all the facts out there. We've had a lot of unnamed sources in the media come out and make statements about Jeff Sessions. It'd be very good to get it directly from him.
Sessions is well known up here on Capitol Hill after serving as a senator for 20 years, but don't expect it to be easy for him tomorrow, John.
So ahead of this hearing, Mike, what are the Democrats saying?
Well, a lot of Democrats spent a whole lot of oxygen, a whole lot of energy to make sure that it was an open session. Now that they have that, a lot of them are arguing for Sessions to appear in front of other panels here on Capitol Hill to give testimony before various committees here on the Hill. The Senate Democratic leader rattled off some questions of his own for Attorney General Sessions.
Did he interfere with the Russian investigation before he recused himself? Second, What safeguards are there now so that he doesn't interfere? Third, it says he was involved in the firing of Comey, and the president said Comey was fired because of Russia. How does that fit in with his recusal? It doesn't seem to stand up well to me.
Schumer also notes that the Attorney General played a role in the selection of the next FBI director. So one question he would like to ask is, did Sessions discuss the Russia probe with the nominee, Christopher Wray? John?
Mike Emanuel, Capitol Hill. Thanks, Mike. More ahead on what to expect during tomorrow's testimony from the Attorney General. I'll talk with a White House reporter about whether Sessions might refuse to give answers, citing executive privilege. Why she says that could play right into the hands of the president's critics. Next. Still in a public hearing around this time tomorrow. Senate lawmakers expected to grill him about meetings he's had with Russia's ambassador and his role in the firing of FBI Director James Comey. Let's bring in Sarah Westwood, White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Attorney General Sessions has said he wants this thing in public, right? There was talk about maybe holding it behind closed doors.
There was, but the Justice Department is indicating now that it's their choice for the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing to be out in the open. Attorney General Sessions requested it rather than talk about the Russian controversy in front of the appropriations committees, as he was expecting to get those kinds of questions during scheduled appropriations hearings. So this is really one of the first chances we're seeing the administration taking to be proactive on the Russian controversy, to go on offense, to have the Attorney General in an open setting on the record address some of these allegations that have been lobbed against him, particularly that he tried to conceal his meetings with the Russian ambassador during the presidential race. It's also risky for him, though, if he comes across as evasive on some of these key questions about his involvement in the Comey firing, then that could give Democrats more fodder to use against the administration.
Well, it's also been suggested that he might claim executive privilege and refuse to answer some of the questions on that basis. If you're going to insist on an open hearing, then why claim executive privilege?
We have no idea what he might invoke executive privilege over. The White House today left the door open for the possibility, but wouldn't specify in what situation. And we're hearing that maybe it might have something to do if he's asked questions about private conversations he's had with the president. Keep in mind that one area of interest for some lawmakers will be whether there was friction between the president and Sessions when Sessions decided to recuse himself from the Russian investigation last month. That was reportedly a big sticking point between the two, and Sessions potentially even threatened to resign over the tension. So if that particular issue comes up, there's a chance Sessions could invoke executive privilege. Likewise, we've heard that he might try to conceal his conversations surrounding Comey's firing. Because those were private conversations with the president, he would be on potentially solid legal ground to invoke executive privilege, but it's not clear that would satisfy some of the president's critics.
I imagine a lot of what we're expecting tomorrow is mostly going to be about the theater, about, you know, the president's antagonists trying to needle the Attorney General and try to get him to say something potentially embarrassing. I mean, they're not expecting to break new ground in this investigation, are they?
Well, that's why it was surprising to some to see that Sessions volunteered for this open session, because it is such an opportunity for the president's critics to try to trip up the Attorney General at a time when he could be vulnerable within the administration. And there are a lot of different areas that Sessions is in a unique position to clarify. One is obviously his meetings with the Russian ambassador during the presidential race, whether he had additional undisclosed contacts with Russians. Another is his role in the removal of James Comey after he had recused himself. And still another, and potentially the most controversial, is whether he believes the president obstructed justice by allegedly requesting Comey drop the Mike Flynn probe. I think you'll see a lot of questions about Sessions' legal opinions about Comey's testimony, and it will be interesting to see if he corroborates Trump's version of events.
Sarah Westwood, Washington Examiner. Thanks.
Thank you.
Police in Russia say they have arrested a top critic of President Vladimir Putin on a day of protests across that country. Anti-corruption demonstrators fanned out across the nation this morning, shouting slogans like, "Putin is a thief." An Associated Press reporter said they noticed as many as 500 arrests. Police carried some of the protesters off and wrestled others to the ground. Police arrested opposition leader Alexei Navalny outside his home. According to state media, he's facing charges of disobeying police. Navalny has announced plans to run for president against Vladimir Putin next year. A setback for the White House. Judges from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling against President Trump's revised travel ban. We'll look at the decision and how the president's already looking to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. Plus, President Trump playing coy about whether he's been recording conversations in the Oval Office. But within the last hour, the Secret Service is weighing in on the possible recordings. What the agency has to say next. Ban, this time from the Ninth Circuit. 3 judges on the Federal Appeals Court upholding a decision from a federal judge in Hawaii who blocked the revised ban. The travel ban targets 6 predominantly Muslim nations. Opponents say it discriminates against Muslims, so it's unconstitutional. The White House says it's confident the travel ban is legal under the president's power to protect the country. Today's decision comes about 3 weeks after an appeals court in Virginia also ruled against the ban. The Trump administration has appealed that ruling to the Supreme Court. Doug McElway live in Washington now. So, Doug, a little more about this Ninth Circuit ruling for us.
Well, today's Ninth Circuit ruling, John, was a surprise to no one. The Ninth Circuit is considered to be the most left-leaning in the country. Its ruling today upholding the travel ban injunction was specifically aimed at the president's revised travel ban, which was less restrictive than the first one. It excluded Iraq from the ban and provided a means for immigrants who are seeking waivers. In its opinion today, the Ninth cited a presidential tweet from June 5th to bolster its case. That tweet read, "That's right, we need a travel ban for certain dangerous countries, not some politically correct term that won't help us protect our people." In citing that tweet, the Ninth wrote, quote, "The president recently confirmed his assessment that it is the countries that are inherently dangerous rather than the 180 million individual nationals of those countries who are barred from entry under the president's travel ban." After the Ninth's opinion was released, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the administration is confident the executive order is fully lawful and ultimately will be upheld by the Supreme Court, and he suggested the president's tweeting is irrelevant to the legal issues at hand.
Cases should be decided on the rule of law and on that. And when you look at what the law is in the U.S. Code that allows the president to do whatever he has to, that's what we were deciding on.
The Ninth Circuit hardly believes that tweet was irrelevant. It cited Spicer's own words about presidential tweets from June 6, quote, "The president is the president of the United States, so they're considered official statements by the president of the United States." John?
So what's the latest on the Supreme Court, Doug?
Well, today was an important milestone in that case because the deadline for opponents to file their written responses to DOJ's petition to implement the travel ban passed just about a half an hour ago. The state of Hawaii just filed its written opposition, and it said, quote, "Now, staying the injunction would irreparably injure respondents and thrust the country back into the chaos and confusion that resulted when the first order was announced. The long-term consequences would be even more significant." It went on to say that the ban is a violation of the Establishment Clause, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. We are expecting a decision from the High Court by week's end. John?
Doug McElway in Washington. Thank you. Well, the Secret Service does not have any audio recordings or transcripts of conversations that took place in the White House since Donald Trump became president. That, according to the Wall Street Journal, after the newspaper submitted a Freedom of Information request. Democrats and some Republican lawmakers have called for President Trump to release any recordings of his conversations with former FBI Director James Comey. On Friday, President Trump said he'd talk about them maybe sometime in the very near future. Today, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer refused to go into more detail.
I think the president made it very clear on Friday that he would get back as soon as possible on this and his position on that conversation.
So what is he waiting for? What's the delay?
He's waiting. He's not waiting for anything. When he's ready to further discuss it, he will.
Earlier today at a cabinet meeting, President Trump did not respond to a reporter's question about whether there are tapes. Let's bring in our panel. Brad Blakeman is a Republican strategist and former advisor to President George W. Bush. Christy Setzer is a Democratic strategist and former Iowa press secretary for Al Gore's presidential campaign. She's also president and founder of New Heights Communications. So, first question to you, Christy. Do Democrats expect that there are tapes, and would they buttress the Democratic claims against the president?
Like James Comey, I'll say, Lordy, I hope there are tapes. But no, I don't think that there are tapes. I think this was a way of President Trump trying to intimidate James Comey. It's apparently something that he's done a number of times in the past, whether it's to reporters or other people he's trying to intimidate by telling them that he's recording their conversation. The reason, of course, that he's been putting it off when people ask him directly if there are tapes and saying, I'll tell you later, is because he knows he's been backed into a corner. He's put both his press secretaries and his staff in a very difficult position right now because obviously they can't say, no, he just made it up. So they're struggling to say something that would make the president look credible here.
Well, it all started with that tweet from the president, Brad, in which he wrote that James Comey better hope there aren't tapes of their conversations. He didn't flat out say that he had them.
That's right. And it was, if anything, it was a warning for Comey to tell the truth and tell it as if he did have a tape recording of his conversation. We don't know if the president had him taped or not. He certainly had the right to do it under the law. But the real question now is, for the president, is he's going to cooperate to the fullest extent with the congressional investigations and with this special counsel, Bob Mueller. So in the course of that investigation,
we'll see,
it will come out whether or not tapes exist. But it's not going to be at the will of the press. It's going to be at the direction of the relevant committees or the special counsel.
The president, Brad, if you were advising him, would you tell him to come out with a statement one way or the other, or do you just let this information, this question kind of hang out there?
I would advise the president, I'm sure as his attorneys did, now that there are congressional investigations and a special counsel, follow their direction and their request. Don't get baited into anything extraordinary beyond that, because this has got to be something that follows a protocol. And the protocols have now been established by the House, the Senate, and now the Justice Department through the special counsel. Follow their direction.
The Russia thing seems to be at the center of this whole story, Christy, and that is not helpful for the White House.
No, it is not. And what is also not helpful is the pattern that the president seems to be creating here of potentially trying to fire people who get too close to the Russia investigation. Right now, we have at least several people we can point to, from Preet Bharara to Sally Yates to Jim Comey, to now, obviously, talk of whether or not he wants to try to fire Robert Mueller, all of whom have been guilty of one thing and one thing only, which is looking into Russia and whether or not the president has inappropriate ties there. So that's not a situation we want to get into. We don't live in a dictatorship. We still live in a democracy. That's not going to be healthy for anybody.
Well, in the case of Preet Bharara, worth pointing out, it's pretty typical for an incoming administration to replace a U.S. attorney. Preet Bharara was a U.S. attorney here in New York.
That's true, but there were other things there where he had, much like Jim Comey, Preet Bharara had said that the president had tried to sort of butter him up and get close to him, and then when it seemed as though he was not interested in that, that is when he fired him as well. So maybe that timing is suspicious, maybe it's not, I'm not sure.
Christy Setzer and Brad Blakeman. Thank you both.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, months ago, President Trump changed the rules about striking terrorists in Somalia, but our military had not tested the new policy until now. Ahead, what we know about the latest airstrike, including who was targeted and what sort of damage it did. Next.